Hi, I'm Bankruptcy Lawyer Robert Weed. The purpose of this video is to take you through the papers that you have to sign so we can officially file your case. To help you understand the papers that we sent to you, this video takes you through a sample bankruptcy filing from Jane Sample. As we go through, you can see what Jane has, and that will help you understand what's on the papers we've typed for you. The first thing I should tell you is the page breaks on Jane Sample's forms might not line up with the page breaks on the forms you have in front of you, because the form slides back and forth depending on what lines are filled in. The questions are numbered though, so it should be easy for you to follow along by question number. The voluntary petition is the first part of the form. On the front page you see that Jane Sample's name is Jane Sample and her previous name was Jane Doe. The last 4 digits of her social security number are there also. Flipping over to the next page is Jane Sample's address. She lives on Easy Street in Fredericksburg. Question 6 asks, why are you filing in the Alexandria division? And the answer is, you have to file where you've lived for most of the last 6 months. Question 7 gives you the 4 choices available under the Bankruptcy Code. Chapter 12 is only for farmers. I've never done a farmer. Chapter 11 is for Donald Trump. I've never done Donald Trump. Chapter 13 is a payment plan through the bankruptcy court. There are some people who need to do a payment plan, but for most people, Chapter 7, sorry, I just can't pay, is the one, and that's what we're doing for Miss Sample. Question 8, are you paying your filing fees? Yes, you're required to. We check yes on paying the fee. That fee is paid in the money you've given me and comes slurping out of my account when we send papers into the court. Question 9 asks if you filed bankruptcy in the last 8 years, but when we get to court they ask you, have you ever filed bankruptcy? So that's what we put in. Jane Sample had filed back in 2001. Question 10 asks, is your spouse or a business you own in bankruptcy right now? Usually the answer to that is no. Question 11 asks if you're a renter, and if you're a renter, are you in the middle of being evicted? Jane Sample is a homeowner, so it's no. If you're a renter, that would be yes, I'm a renter, but we hope no, I'm not being evicted. Question 12 asks, are you doing a business in your own name? And then question 13, are you filing Chapter 11, meaning have you become Donald Trump in the last 2 pages? You weren't Donald Trump last page and you're not Donald Trump now either. Question 14 is a new question. Do you have property that's a threat to the community? Do you have a cage full of skunks in your truck? Most people answer no to that one. Then on part 5, the court uses up a whole page to say, yes, I took the required class. I hope you've taken the required class because we can't send your papers to the court until you do. So if you haven't, as soon as you finish this video, that would be a good time to take the class. Finally, part 6, are your debts consumer debts or business debts? For most people, their debts are consumer debts. And are you in Chapter 7? Yup, for the reasons we talked about a little bit ago, you still are. Then they ask how many people do you owe money to? Jane owes money to less than 50 people. The assets, the things she owns, are worth less than $500,000 total. A lot of that's her house. Her total debt is also less than $500,000. She signs, and then over on the next page, I sign that I'm her attorney. The next section of the forms is Schedule A, B, and C. You probably remember when you filled out our Be Happy form on the internet, you had to go through a long list and tell us about all the things you own. Schedules A and B are where we list that stuff, and Schedule C is where we tell the bankruptcy court that it's protected and they're not allowed to take it from you. It's really important that you list everything you own, no matter how much it's worth, because you could lose your entire bankruptcy if the court says you left something out on purpose. As you review the forms, keep in mind that the value of the furniture and clothes is not that important. We're looking for garage sale or goodwill values, not how much you paid for the stuff originally. Now in part 1, they ask you, do you own any real estate? Jane Sample owns her house on Easy Street. Then we go over to your vehicles in part 2. Jane Sample has a Nissan Sentra with 22,000 miles on it. After the house and cars, part 3 asks more generally about your other stuff. Number 6 is household furniture, and the court doesn't care much about your furniture unless you say you don't have anything. Then they think you're being smart and they'll yell at you. And your electronics, your computer, cell phone, all that, sporting equipment, firearms. Number 11 is clothing. Make sure you put down that you have some clothes. I remember years ago, Judge Kaiser in Baltimore, when I did bankruptcy law there, expected people to itemize their underwear. They don't make you be that detailed here, but they do want you to list something. Number 12 is jewelry, and then number 13, your pets. You're allowed to keep your pets, but we have to list them. Then they ask you a little bit about personal health aids and anything else that doesn't fit into any of the categories. Then we go into part 4, the financial stuff. Number 16 is cash. How much money do you have in your pocket? Number 17 is your bank accounts. You're required to list all your bank accounts, even if there's only $1 in them. Jane Sample has SunTrust, and she also has an account for one of our kids. Nothing causes more uproar at court than when they ask you, did you put down all your bank accounts? And you say, well, I have another one, but I never use it. And they say, how do I know you never use it since you didn't put it down? So please put down all the bank accounts. Stocks and bonds, number 18. Sometimes people do, usually they don't. Incorporated, unincorporated businesses, government bonds, retirement accounts. Your retirement account money is nearly always safe in Virginia, but they need to go on question 21. Security deposits are number 22. Number 23 is annuity. 24 is college savings plans. Any trusts are number 25. Do you own any patents, book rights, anything like that? That's number 26. Licenses, franchises. Do you own a McDonald's franchise? Typically not, but that would go on 27 if you did. Then 28, tax refunds coming. Jane Sample filed early in the year before she'd gotten a refund, so we listed some refunds coming. And then, does anybody owe you alimony, child support, anything like that? Under Virginia law, that's all protected from the bankruptcy court, but we need to know that, and we need to list it on 29. Question 30, does anybody else owe you any money? In terms of what they might owe you money for, insurance policies. Do you have life insurance with cash value? That's protected in Virginia, but we need to put it down. Has anybody died and left you any money? That's very important. Then things like car accidents or slip and falls. It's very important if you have a car accident or any other kind of accident claim, you put it down. Under Virginia law, that's safe from the bankruptcy court, but if you don't tell the bankruptcy court about it, you forfeit it. The state courts in Virginia are very, very strict at calling out those forfeits if you don't list the accident claims. Then any other claims and any other stuff we haven't asked you about. On to part 5, here they're asking about your businesses. Do you own any businesses? Jane doesn't. Any business commissions, business equipment, business machinery, business inventory, business partners, business customers, business anything? Jane's no on all those. You might have a small business, you might be selling Mary Kay, anything like that we need to put down. Part 6, they ask about farms and fishing. Do you own any farm animals, farm crops, farm equipment, farm supplies, fishing equipment, fishing supplies, or fish? Probably no on all that. Part 8 is the totals of everything we've talked about, and then right after that, there's a continuation page which gives a little bit of a detailed breakdown on the furniture. Our next section, Schedule C, is very important. Schedule C is the list of things that we're protecting from the bankruptcy court. We're saying, no, you're not allowed to take this away. Jane Sample is protecting her car, the Nissan Sentra. Under Virginia law, you're allowed to protect a paid-for car worth up to $6,000. Jane's Nissan is worth $13,000. She still owes a lot of money on it. We're saying, no, you can't take it. She owes almost as much as the car's worth. your furniture and appliances. The bankruptcy court here in Alexandria totally doesn't care about your furniture. In Harrisonburg, sometimes they do go out and look for people's furniture. They never do that here. Jane listed it all, and it's all protected under the Code of Virginia for furniture and appliances. Jewelry counts against your $5,000 cash limit, so it's important not to value your jewelry really high. The bankruptcy court here is not interested in taking your stuff down to the pawn shop, but it does count against your cash limit. Jane valued her costume jewelry at $50. Now, if you have a wedding or engagement ring, the wedding or engagement rings are totally protected under Virginia law, so it doesn't matter what value you put on them, but again, don't put some realistically high value on it that just looks strange. In Virginia, they can't take your pets, regardless of what they're worth. They can't take Jane's dog. Her bank accounts and cash on hand count against her $5,000 cash limit. She doesn't have much of that. The 401k and your retirements have their own protection under the law. They're totally protected. Tax refunds are sometimes protected, may count against your cash limit. Earned income credit, child tax credit are protected under a different limit. Life insurance, nobody's died and left her any money. You notice we didn't put down anything for her home. The reason we didn't put down anything for her house is she owes more than it's worth, and the bankruptcy court's not interested in that. The $5,000 cash limit in Virginia counts against the equity in your house, so we have to be very careful if there's any equity at all. That takes us over to Schedule D, where we list the secured claims. Secured claims are debts that are attached to things. The list is alphabetical, so in Jane's case, Nissan Financial for the car is what shows up first. Wells Fargo is attached to Jane's house on Easy Street. And you can see that Jane owes $290,000 on the house, and it's only worth $278,000. So the bankruptcy court, if they wanted to sell Jane's house, would have to pay Wells Fargo $12,000. The bankruptcy court doesn't want to do that. The bankruptcy court wouldn't allow it. It's not allowed. Since she owes more on her house than it's worth, it's completely safe from the bankruptcy court. We want to be in a situation where that's the case with you. If it's borderline, hopefully we talked about that at some length before we've gotten to this point. Now, Schedule E. Do you owe any money to the tax man? Do you owe alimony or child support? Jane does owe some money to the IRS, about $400, and she also has a support obligation to her ex, Joe Sample. So we listed Joe Sample as somebody she still has to pay. After we get through taxes and child support, then we have to list everybody else. This will include the student loans you're still stuck with and with the people we're wiping out. Jane, you can see, owes money to Bank of America on a credit card. That's being cleared. BB&T on an overdraft. That's cleared. Capital One on a credit card. Cleared. Then you see Nelnet, which is a student loan. It's her biggest debt. Chapter 7 bankruptcy doesn't touch student loans. She's still going to be stuck with that. Discover is a credit card. It's gone. Springleaf is a finance company. It's gone. Over on the next page, there's a Walmart card. It's gone. Verizon is gone too. This last page of this section lists second and third addresses for the people we've already talked about. And in the case of the Walmart card, we have second, third, and fourth addresses all on that. Dewey Cheatham is the lawyer for Midland. Midland is the debt buyer for the Walmart card. So we've listed both of those. And then Midland is chasing Jane in the General District Court in Stafford County. So we also shoot a notice over to Stafford General District so the bankruptcy court lets them know that the General District Court has to stop. Besides that, there are 3 addresses we were required to list for the IRS. We saw one before. Here's addresses 2 and 3 for the IRS. Then on Part 4, we have a total for all the different categories. Student loans, which you still have to pay. Taxes, you still have to pay. Support, still have to pay. And then down at the bottom, Jane has $28,481 listed as other, and the others are people who are going to be gone. Schedule G is car leases and leases on business equipment. We see car leases fairly often, business equipment leases hardly ever. If you have a car lease, you need to keep up the payments if you want to keep the car. Then cosigners are in Schedule H. Jane doesn't have any cosigners, but you might, and they need to be written down here. Our next sections, Schedules I and J, are your budget. You can't get approved for a Chapter 7 bankruptcy to tell your creditors, sorry, I can't pay, unless you can show the bankruptcy court that you can't pay. So Schedule I, your income, and Schedule J, your expenses, are important to show the court there isn't a lot of money left over at the end of the month. Virginia works as an administrative assistant for a wonderful company. We can see that her gross pay is $58.65.32 a month. On the next page, Jane's paycheck is broken down, showing the taxes coming out, insurance coming out, and a support obligation. Jane's paying some money to her ex, who has partial custody of one of the children and who's not making as much money as she is. All that comes out, and you see at the bottom, her monthly take-home pay is just under $4,000. This is sometimes confusing. If you're paid twice a month, your take-home pay should be half the amount on line 12 each pay period. But if you're paid every other week, it will be higher because there are 2 months where you get paid 3 times. Those 2 extra pays get spread over the whole year. For example, Jane is paid every other week. She brings home $1826.64 per pay period. In order to calculate the monthly, you multiply $1826.64 by 26 pay periods, then divide by 12 months, which gives us the $3957.72. Now we're going over to Schedule J, her expenses, and we see her family. She has full-time custody of her son, 7. The daughter's with the ex, but she spends a good part of the time with Jane, too, so we're counting her here. Part 2 looks at the expenses. We have a house payment, a budget for repair, the HOA dues, if you have an HOA. Then we've got utilities, phones, food and clothes, a little bit going for haircuts, stuff like that, medical co-payments, deductibles, gasoline, car repair, car insurance, some entertainment for the kids. In Jane's case, a church or other religious affiliation she gives 10 or 15 a week to. Car insurance, Virginia car tax, student loan payment. She's still going to be stuck with the student loans that we talked about. You can see when we get to the end of the month that Jane's still broke, because line 23C shows she has negative $240 left at the end of the month. In this case, there isn't. Sometimes a page after that, there's a continuation pages that breaks out separately some of the expenses like hair care and pet care. Now we have the summary of everything we've talked about so far. Total value of her real estate, $278. Total value of everything else, $27,142. Her debts, $301,560, are the debts attached to the house and car. The taxes, child support obligations, everything else that includes both the credit cards, stuff we're getting rid of, and also in that total $347,942 is the student loans which she's still stuck with. Then on the next page, a little more breakdown. What we have here is breaking down the student loans separately. The next page is the declaration. You're signing that you're telling the truth on all that. Sign here. The next section is called the Statement of Affairs. They want to know the other details about what's going on in your life, or in this case, what's going on in Jane Sample's life. First of all, marital status. Jane, as I've told you, is divorced. She checks off not married. Where else have you lived in the last 3 years? Part of bankruptcy law depends on where you lived 2 years ago. A lot of cases somewhere other than Virginia would be better, but Jane's lived in Virginia. You'll put down where you've been living. In question 3, they ask if you're married and lived in a state that has connection with Spanish law, where the debts of one spouse are the debts of both. That doesn't apply in Virginia, and Jane Sample hasn't lived in any of those states. Question 4 asks about her income for the current year and the last 2 years. You'll see that for the current year, James listed just 1 month's income because she filed bankruptcy in February. Then you see 2018, 2017, she's been right at $70,000. the boss at a wonderful company is not giving her any raises. Next, we need to look at income other than earned income, and you see in 2017 she was selling Mary Kay and made a little money doing that, and then they ask about anything else, including Social Security, military retirement, anything else that might apply. None of that applies to her. Question 6 asks about the money that's gone out in the last few months. If you're hiding money away from the bankruptcy court, they want to know about it. So 6A, if your debts are primarily business debts, they want to know the last 3 months if you paid anybody more than $6,225. That doesn't apply to Jane. If your debts are consumer debts, personal debts, they want to know if you've paid anybody any more than $600. You can see this is one of the places where they bear down harder on consumers than they do on businesses. In Jane's case, it's the mortgage payment that's been more than $600. In a lot of cases, it'll be the car payment too, if there's a car payment. Finally, a key one, did you pay any debts to any family members, which the bankruptcy law calls insiders? If you've been paying money back to mom when you haven't been able to afford to pay your other debts, the bankruptcy court can turn around and go after mom to get that money and divide it up among everybody else. Hopefully, if you've been paying money to mom, we've talked about it before we get to this point, Jane hasn't been doing that. Question 8 is related to question 7. It asks if, besides paying money to mom, have you been paying money to mom's debts? They ask that just to cover that too. With questions 9, 10, and 11, we're looking at legal actions. Question 9 is court suits. Midland Funding is suing for the Walmart card. They had a court date pending in Stafford General District. That was the triggering event for Jane to come talk to us. Your court dates, if they've been in the last year, would go there. Question 10 and 11 ask if anything's been foreclosed, repossessed, or garnished in the last 90 days. Were any of your accounts frozen? Question 12 asks if you made an assignment for benefit for creditors. I learned about that in law school. I've never actually seen it. Questions 13 and 14 asked if you've given anybody more than $600 in the last 2 years. Hopefully you've kept your Christmas presents below $600, and hopefully you didn't give your brother the Corvette. Did you give any charities more than $600? Jane's giving $50 a month to her church. Finally, they ask about gambling, fire, theft losses. That's another way that unexplained money could have left your hands, so they want to know about it. Jane doesn't have any of those problems. Next, they ask about payments to a bankruptcy lawyer. Jane paid me, and you've paid me too. Thank you very much. We also have to tell them about the credit counseling class you took before filing, probably with Money Sharp. Then they ask another question about having signed up for a debt settlement operation or any of those kinds of things. That's question 17. Hopefully the answer is no, because those things don't work very well. Next, did you transfer anything out of the ordinary in the last 2 years? Jane took out a 401k loan, and she also traded in a car. Then, in the last 10 years, did you set up a trust on your own behalf? I've never met anybody who did that. You need to have a lot of money on lawyers and real long planning horizon to set up a trust more than within the last 10 years. Then they ask you if any of your bank accounts were closed in the last year. Her BB&T account got closed because it was overdrawn. Does she have a safe deposit box with any money or gold in it? Do you have any money or gold in your storage unit? Are you holding any property that belongs to anybody else? If mom's letting you drive her car, then that should be in here. In Part 10, they want to know, are you being prosecuted for any environmental violations, and do you own any hazardous waste dumps? Over the 15,000 people I've helped, I've actually had 2 people who had inherited hazardous waste dumps. Finally, they're asking again about businesses. As I told you before, a few years ago, she was selling Mary Kay. Paragraph 12, they ask you, sign here. The next form is statement of intentions. The bankruptcy court wants to know what you plan to do with your house or car in terms of, are you keeping up the payments and keep the house, keeping up the payments and keep the car, or are you giving them back? The law here is that it's just what you plan to do right now, and you're not bound by it, although sometimes it comes up, so we need to be careful about what we're saying here. Jane knows what she's saying. She's planning to keep up the payments to Wells Fargo on the house and Nissan on the car and keep them. The next page, they ask you if you're keeping up the payments or giving back your leased car, and for some reason they give us about 7 blanks on that, and after that, your signature down at the bottom, please sign. The next form is called the Statement of Your Current Monthly Income. Everybody calls it the means test. As I told you back in I and J, we need to show the court why you can't afford to pay. We have to do that on 2 different budgets. The first budget we looked at in I and J was your actual budget. This budget is a budget the court assigns to you, and you need to show the court you're broke on both budgets. So here we're looking again at Jane's sample with a monthly income that was a little higher than it was on I because she got a bonus in December. Including that bonus, her average monthly income is $6,365.32. Then flip over and you'll see she's a family of 2. That's her and her son. Maybe we aren't allowed to count her daughter because she spends too much time with her dad. She has automatic eligibility as a family of 2 in Virginia if she's making less than the cutoff. The cutoff for 2, 76,047. Now that adjusts every 6 months. So she doesn't have automatic eligibility to file Chapter 7, and we need to go on to the second half of the form. If you're under the amount that's allowed for your family of that size, then the form stops here. The first page of the long form, for people that don't have automatic income eligibility, carries over the average monthly income that we just saw. Question 5 asks the number of dependents. Again, Jane has 2, herself and her son. Question 6 is the assigned food allowance. Question 7 is the assigned health care allowance. You get more if you're over 65. Jane isn't. Questions 8 through 15 deduct housing and transportation expenses. You get a utility allowance that you're just assigned to. In certain circumstances, we can claim more than that. You get a rent allowance, and you get the rent allowance, or if your house payment is more, you get to claim the house payment even if it's more than the rent allowance. On the vehicle operation expenses, they give you $221 a month for car, which is supposed to cover gasoline, car repair, car insurance. That's a ridiculously low number, and we are not allowed to change that unless you have a junker car, and then the judge usually allows us to add another $200 junker car allowance to take it up to $421. In terms of the car payment, the court goes through a really complicated formula, but ends up you get credit for a car payment of $497 a month, or if the car payment is less. If the car payment is more than that, and you still have more than 5 years to go, we're allowed to claim the bigger payment on the car. Question 16 is your taxes. We get those straight from your paycheck, although if you have the Virginia car tax, we need to add a little bit for that in there too. Then question 17 through 24 asks about other things that are coming out, like life insurance, child support, child care. Question 25 gets your health insurance, which usually comes out of your pay stub. 26 through 31 asks for other things like help for elderly family members, private school for the kids, although there's a very, very low cap on private school, and charitable contributions. Question 33 is your mortgage and car payments. As we said before, if your mortgage payment is more than the rental allowance, the formula works out so you're claiming the higher number. The car payment, they calculate a lower number and then round it up. Again, unless you have more than 5 years to go and the payment's more than the allowance, then you end up effectively claiming what the payment actually is. If you're behind on your house payment, question 34 figures out how much you would have to pay over 5 years to catch the house back up. If you want to keep the house, you may need to pay it off sooner than 5 years, but in terms of your eligibility to file bankruptcy, 5 years is what they calculated on. And then question 35 is taxes, child support, alimony, and arrearages on those things. And as we said, she owes $400 to the IRS, which works out to $6.67 on her eligibility budget. Finally, in Part 3, on line 39C, you can see that after all the deductions, the assigned budget says that Jane is in the hole $285.98 every month. So even though she doesn't have automatic income eligibility, she has long-form income eligibility and still qualifies for Chapter 7. If the line on Form 39C isn't negative, that can be okay as long as the total amount isn't positive more than $7,700 over 5 years. Then you can still qualify. If it's more than that, we need to have a long talk. The last page on the long form is another signature page. Next, I'm required to tell the court what you've paid me. They figure if Jane had paid me $50,000, she would have been able to pay everybody off. Alas, I only charged her $3,285. The next few pages is a list of all your creditors that the court uses to mail out a notice that you've filed bankruptcy. Our software automatically pulls that list from Schedules D, E, and F, and then there's a signature page where you sign again, yup, that's everybody. The last thing you need to sign is your Social Security number. Jane's social is 111-22-3333. Make sure we have this right. There's heck to pay if we get your Social Security number wrong. If we have it right, then we look forward to your paper going to the bankruptcy court and everything getting approved smoothly. Thanks again for watching my video.